You're listening to ViewSource, a conversation around tech, web development, and WordPress with hosts Aurooba and that's me, and Brian Quartz. Hello, hello. We're recording today on a Friday, and I'm a little under the weather today, but how are you?
I'm feeling great. No complaints. No, I'm not.
Sounds good.
I'm not. I'm not racked with like the weird disabilities of like a senior citizen or anything weird like that. So no, I'm doing great.
Uh-huh. All right. So today's opening question to you is, what kind of HTML do you often find yourself modifying with PHP?
Modifying HTML with PHP. So I have a bunch of HTML sitting somewhere, and I
Yes.
have access to PHP because I'm probably in WordPress, and
Yes.
I need to like do it. The big example I can think of is I've had sites like very large WordPress content sites
Yeah.
where they say something, and this is like especially in the days of the classic editor, but would probably
Mm-hmm.
still apply, where they say
Yeah.
something like, we want a rel tag changed on every link in our database that points to an internal link. So you have to
Right.
scan every content, find every link, make sure it's an internal link, then change the rel tag. Don't lose the tags that are there. Add this new one, something like that. A regular
Mm-hmm.
expression nightmare. That's like the kind of example I could think of. Something I've done a lot.
Totally. Totally. There's two that I've been having to do recently. One is modifying the gallery code for the WordPress gallery block to make it work with a lightbox.
Mm.
And two is modifying existing shortcodes to add more features to them, to their output, so that we can target them in certain ways.
And those are kind of similar because the gallery is kind of like a short, it's like a short code, right? Kind of.
No, I mean,
Like,
no, it's like a gallery wrapper, and then they have like the image blocks inside it, sort of like an inner blocks setup.
well, I'm thinking like classic old
Yeah,
gallery. But
yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah. Those are like a good example. It's kind of like anytime you get a bunch of HTML and you're just so used to like in WordPress being able to just change anything, like you're so used to like
Yeah,
a filter, a hook, an action, every variable like has a place for you to like modify it. And when you're just
yeah,
dealing with like already rendered HTML, it's kind of like, oh, like I really don't want to like layer JavaScript on and like do weird things that we
yes,
all know is bad. So
exactly.
it comes up.
But totally, totally. But today I want to talk about a very specific situation that you definitely found yourself dealing with a lot in your project. And then I found myself having to deal with it a little bit in my project too. And that is the scenario of needing a lot of SVG elements in your
Mhm.
PHP code. So do you want to tell us a little bit about, like, give us a little context for that?
Well, I'm like a huge fan of inline SVGs. Like browser support be damned, I will just throw an SVG code like straight into the markup. And because I really hate loading like icon fonts and I really hate dealing with all that stuff. And I love when you stick an SVG like straight into straight into your code, and then you can treat it like HTML in the sense that you can apply colors and sizes to
Yep.
it. It can inherit the color using like
Mm-hmm.
current color. I just love that whole idea. And so when I'm building a site, I often throw all my SVGs into like a folder, and then I try to do things like use like get template part or something, or like write a little function so that I can
Right.
just pass the name and I can get the SVG and I can just like inject it into my templates and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's usually a place where I'm like playing around with SVGs a lot in like the
Mm-hmm.
PHP world.
Totally. And same thing goes for me. In my case, I had an SVG in a project, and it was the same SVG, but it has different colors related to different situations because it was like connected to the background of another block. So it needs to like inherit the
Yeah.
color of that block, right? So I wanted the same thing. I want to inline the SVG so that it's really easy to change the fill color without having to have a different image or whatever for each different version. And in this case, it would have been like 9 different versions of the same image. I didn't want to do that. So I know that you and I found and saw a bunch of different SVG gists lying around on the World Wide Web, and we'll link to a bunch of those in the show notes. But we came up with the idea for a different technique, which is related to a new feature class.
Yeah.
What is it called? Yeah, that came in WordPress
A
6.2,
new cool
right?
thing.
And
Yeah.
yeah, a really neat cool thing called the WP HTML tag processor. And honestly, I think it's one of the coolest non-Gutenberg things to come out of a WordPress release in a while, right?
Yes, although there was like just this morning an announcement of like
Yes.
you know what I'm talking about, where they're like
Yeah.
making copies of your plugins before you that
But
that'll be
that's
a
not
close
in a
second.
release yet.
That's not
Yeah,
there
but
yet. Yeah,
like yeah. But in existing releases, this is really exciting.
yeah. Yes.
So, um when you hear that term, and I mean obviously you already know what it does, what do you think about? What do you guess that it might do?
So the HTML tag processor takes HTML tags
Yeah.
and then it processes them.
Yes.
That's
Right?
what you wanted me to say, right? That's what you were queuing me up for?
Sure. Um I mean, it's really cool because what it really does, right, is it breaks down the tags in any given HTML and lets you update its internal attributes or properties without having to use regular expressions. So it's like a really fantastic replacement for regular expressions in a lot of situations where you might use like something like preg match or preg replace in PHP, to try to like do some janky thing that's only going to work in very specific situations and could easily break sometimes. And now we have a lot more safer version to traverse sort of the DOM, right? An HTML tree.
Yeah, and I was thinking back to some of the other approaches we've done. Like I think there's like the DOM document class, right? Like
Yes.
there's all these other ways that we've done this, and then this one it just
Yeah.
feels like somebody finally like I just imagine somebody was like, this just needs to exist. It feels like a thing that needs to exist. Somebody just got so frustrated, I guess, and just was like, I'm gonna build a tag processor for HTML because at the end of the day, HTML it's it's pretty like standard, like it's
Mhm.
not going to
Mhm.
change. We all write it the same. Once you
Yeah.
start breaking tags into like little attributes and properties and stuff, so it's kind of one of those things like I can't believe this didn't exist before, and I'm glad that somebody
Yes.
finally did it and that it's just sitting there in WordPress like ready for you to use. It's not some extra PHP thing that's like has to be installed on your server, blah blah blah. Like it's
Yeah.
just there ready to use.
Exactly. So, taking this really cool sort of HTML tag processor, we have now I created this function that I think I've already started using it personally, um, to help us process inline SVGs and make some modifications that you might need to make before you sort of input it into your PHP code. Do you want to go through the code and stuff with me?
Yeah, show me this code. Where cuz I think this is such a good example. Well, on a side note, did you see the blog post? Was it Adam's
Adam.
blog post?
Yes, I think that's how I discovered it. Adam, and I'm not going to say the last name because I'll probably butcher it, but we'll put the
Yeah.
link to the post in the show notes. Tweeted about it before 6.2 release, and that's how I found out that this thing existed.
But did you see the blog post actually has like little inline like examples of the tag
That
processor
run,
that run and you can change them and you can
yeah,
change the code you give it to see how it works. Just a
yes,
super cool post that if you want to wrap your head around all the different ways you could use it, definitely a must read and a must
I,
click
I
and
actually
interact
feel
with.
like I want to share my screen and show that first. So let's do that first. Okay. So this is Adam's blog, the one that you were just talking about. And it has this little playground, this live example that you can actually run. And then it will change, show you what that HTML output is. But you can actually like play with it, like you just said. So I could add an exclamation mark here, run it again, and it'll show me what that new output will look like. I've never seen this
Yeah.
done before, like, but I'm starting to see this in a lot of different places where people have like little mini playgrounds in their blog posts,
Hmm.
and they're really cool.
Yeah, and what's neat about it is like that first example of I have an image and it needs an alt tag, and that's like kind of a common one because there are some spots in WordPress, like I remember like avatars and things like that, where like sometimes
Yeah.
you're dealing with the HTML after it's already created, and you don't want to mess
Hmm.
with it, you don't want to break it, you don't want to like add stuff to it. So the fact that you can just grab that HTML, it breaks it all into
Right.
little pieces. You can look for the element you want, change the attribute that you want, and then it gives
Hmm.
you back that perfectly formatted HTML. Super cool.
Exactly. Yeah, and it like, Adam breaks it down really well, and this was like the first post that I read about it that really like cemented my understanding of the processor. So I definitely encourage everyone to go read the post. It's super awesome. And then we'll also link to the actual official dev note that goes a little bit more into detail of how this thing works as well. But the post that I have here is in our, view source blocks theme. And here, this is actually a PHP template which renders an SVG version of our logo in the footer, and it adds like a little class to it and a bunch of different things, using this little SVG helper function that we'll walk through that uses the HTML tag processor to create this. So it's super simple, but this is what the output is like.
So the output is an SVG on the front end of your website, but
Hmm.
the magic is what can I do to that SVG before it spits out without having to, because I'm not gonna lie, I have like a recent project in mind where it was like variations of like buttons, and it was like a different one for each color. And
Yeah.
you know, part of that was because I was using background images and not inline SVGs, so it was a little
Hmm.
harder to pass those like variables and stuff. But this I'm excited to see what your function looks like.
Yeah, so let's look at the function. So here we are. This is sitting in the functions.php file of the branch of view source blocks, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. And I called it just very simply get SVG in, the pattern of all WordPress functions. Although there was a time when I was like, maybe it should have been get the SVG, but I was like, it's okay. It can just be get SVG. And it takes a few different parameters. It takes a file name, what attributes you might want to change, and optionally where a directory for where the image lives. So it
And
has a
that's based
default.
on your
Go
theme.
ahead.
Like this would
Yes.
be in a theme.
Exactly. So this is assuming a use in theme, but obviously if you were going to stick this function into a plugin, you could change this default and the first line where it's actually getting the file contents from the directory. So here I have it set to like, be get style sheet directory and then whatever the default image directory is if you've or the one that you've passed. So in a lot of my themes, I usually have like an assets folder and then there's like an images folder. So I set that up as my default. And that way, when I'm using the function, all I have to pass it is the name. It doesn't even need to have the .svg extension because it's literally meant for SVG. So just the name of the file and what things I might want to modify about it if I do want to.
What if I do pass .svg at the name of the file?
Yeah, right now this doesn't account for that. So it
Oh
will
man.
definitely throw an error. I mean, it
I'm
can be
already like
improved.
I'm looking at this being like I'm gonna throw so many extra slashes in that directory that you're gonna be like, none of this is working. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like there's a very specific way that you need to use the function in order for it to work. And it doesn't have too many fail safes in it. But there is one fail safe that I did add to it. And hey, it was, hey, if that file name doesn't actually exist, it will throw an error and then it will let you know like what it was trying to assume. So it'll say, hey, this is the directory that I was looking in. And here is sorry, this is gonna bother me.
Hmm.
There we go.
Yeah, please,
Um
please.
yeah, gotta align those arrows in an array.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Those
And
ligature
so it'll
arrows.
yeah. So well, they're pretty. The ligature arrows are pretty. They're nice. But yeah, it'll tell you the file name and the directory that it was trying to find it from. So hopefully that helps you debug the error if you end up with one. So I did put a little failsafe in there, just a tiny
Yeah.
little bit. Okay, so once we've gone here and we're assuming the file is all good. It was an SVG file. We were able to get it to it successfully. Then we go ahead and we initialize the HTML tag processor with the code, with with the string that has the SVG code in it.
Yeah, because we want, like, we're dealing with a string essentially. Like when you're dealing with the
Yes,
HTML tag processor, so you're using file get contents because you don't want the SVG file, you want the contents of the file as a
correct.
string that you can pass into the processor.
Exactly. And this is really nice because one of the actual other like variations of this that I used to do before is I would stick the SVG file into a PHP file. And this way you don't even have to do that. You can just grab a regular SVG file from wherever you might need it. Just you run file get contents and then grab the string that has the HTML code in it. So you use that to initialize the HTML tag processor. And then the very first sort of command you call from this class, this object that you've created, is next tag. And
Mhm.
next tag is basically, in this case, the first tag. But that's how you say, okay, I want to apply whatever I'm about to do to this tag right now, because you could have multiple tags in your string that is your HTML, right? And this will let you process every single one, even the opening tags, even the closing tags, technically.
What if, I'm curious,
Yeah.
what if I got my SVG and it came from like Adobe Illustrator where they put a bunch of like junk at the top, like a XML tag and all
Mm.
that stuff? Does it deal with all of that? Are you aware? Do I have to have a
Mm.
nicely formatted, clean SVG without all that extra junk?
Yeah, this right now this assumes that there's only the one like general SVG tag in your file, but that's a good point. This should probably like have a check in it to make sure that it is the actual we're targeting the actual SVG element tag.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna add that here as a to do.
What does Copilot think you need to do?
Well, now it's telling me correctly. But before it was like just check that there's attributes, or it was trying to document the if statement first.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can add that information here later, but let's assume that we are in an SVG element. And actually, maybe it's helpful. This is the SVG element that we're currently working with. So it's just a file and it only has one top level SVG element, and that's the SVG. And then inside there's like a bunch of paths and gradients and that kind of thing. And that's all that this file has. And the way I got this, I created this thing in Figma, and then I was just able to right click on Figma and the image in Figma and just have it export an SVG version of it. So Figma is actually really nice. It will do a pretty clean code file for an SVG.
Yeah. So you, you weren't in Adobe Illustrator in,
No.
2015, pulling up that crazy like export as a screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That stuff it does do some pretty wild things with the file there for sure. All right. So once we're in there, in this case, if there are any attributes that we've passed it to change, so like let's say you wanted to change the width of the attribute of the SVG, it'll go
Hmm.
through that and then update the SVG with it. And for that, the HTML tag processor actually provides us with a function called set attribute, and you just pass it the name of the attribute and then the value you want to set it to. And even if that attribute already exists, it will overwrite it. So it's not like if there was already a width one, it'll add an additional width attribute. So that's really
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah, that's super handy, especially like you ever get in that place where you add like a style tag, but there was already a style, like there's a style
Yeah.
attribute here, and then it's adding it here, and then it's ignoring the first one. And yeah, it's
Hmm.
the fact that it can like be a little more contextual and like actually update the information. That's better. But what about classes? Does it'll override the classes?
Yeah, so if you were to use set attribute to set the class, then it overrides it. But they actually have like a special function for it called add class that you can use instead. And what that'll do is it will find the existing class attribute if there is one, and it will include your class and instead of overriding the entire property, which is really, really nice because sometimes you have SVGs or really anything that you might be processing. You might have other classes that are really important for the styling, but then you want to add something of your own as well, right? I mean, that's a
Hmm.
very common use case.
It's like so little code, no regular
Yeah.
expressions, no like, I'm not like going into that. What's that like? I go to like regex101.com and you're like, all right, do I
Yes.
need a bracket? Do I need an I? Do I need a asterisk here? You know, you're not like dealing
Mhm.
with any of that stuff. You're just
Yeah.
using some nice functions.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like double the lines of codes it needs to be just because there's comments in here. But yeah, so in this case, this function, it checks, if you're trying to do a class, it will use the add class function. Otherwise, it'll use the set attribute function and it will set the attribute. And then it will we use a function from the processor called get updated HTML, which will return the updated version, and then you can just return it. And in this case, like you could also echo it, but I choose to return it because that's a little bit more flexible on the front end. And that's it. You've modified your SVG. And honestly, this function could be very quickly and very easily set up to work with almost any kind of HTML you want it to instead of just an SVG, you know?
So where are you using this function? Do you have like a template we
Yes.
can look at? Because I want to see you. I want to see you call it.
Yeah. So I created a little template and actually, tangent. This is a block theme. So first I had to like Google how do you add a PHP template and have it render like the header and the footer and all of the proper things in a PHP template that's inside a block theme. So there's a lot of code in this template, but the part that we
Maybe
care about, what?
maybe we need a demo like code, like a theme that's not a block theme for some of these episodes where we're
But I
doing
got it
things.
figured. So now it's good. Now we
Yeah,
can do a PHP template whenever we want. um so I can maybe merge.
you're the only person like hacking the block theme to go back to. Please let me just spit out some PHP.
It works, and I think there's gonna be a lot of use cases. Like, I think that there is a situation where you might wanna do mostly a block theme, but have, like, maybe 1 or 2 custom things that you need. So, honestly, this, like, the ability to create a PHP template in a block theme could be and probably should be easier than having to, like, do all this extra code that I did, but apparently this is how it's working for now, so it's okay. So
Well,
here on Go ahead.
I was gonna say, it was just thinking about we were just talking about SVG icons separately, and I was talking. There's like an icon block from like Nick Diego that you could put any
Yeah.
SVG into it, and it'll like
Yeah.
render a block on the front end. And I was just thinking how
Mhm.
you could use that combined with something like this, where like if you're using the block editor and you're putting in SVG icons using a plugin or something like that, and you're like, man, I wish I could use the tag processor. Like those, all these opportunities for you to just like parse out the HTML of your page and find the
Yeah.
things that you want and like mess with them and stuff. Like it opens up like so much more freedom to know that you can tweak the individual elements.
Yes, the output. Yeah, total no, I totally agree. And it's pretty cool, honestly. I mean, block themes are still kind of work in progress, but the amount of stuff that you can already do in them and the fact that they still support PHP, even if not as well as I would like, is really, really nice. So in this case, I have basically a regular page. And it does like you can put your regular blocks, your content in it, but then in the footer, I decided to use the get SVG function to render the actual logo. So here I first initialize get SVG, then I pass it the name of my file. So in this case, it's called view source dash mark. And then I pass it an array of my attributes. So the very first thing I have is a class, and the class is site dash footer underscore underscore view source dash mark. And then I say, hey, if there's a height on this SVG, I want you to null it out, make it empty because I don't want it to have its own height. But if there is a width, let's make the width 200 pixels. And so if I go to the front end and we inspect this little thing right here, let me make that bigger. You can see that it has a class now and the height is empty. So it does show the height, but it's empty.
Mm-hmm.
And the width is set to 200 pixels. But I could easily go ahead right now and make it do something else if you tell me what to do.
Hmm. Well, you could like you could change the fill color. You could go
Yes.
deeper and you could go into like the path and you could change colors like there if you really knew like what you were looking for. Or like you could go through, you could like, I don't know, there's a lot of things you could do
I
with
mean,
it.
this particular function doesn't handle
Well,
inner
your function, yeah.
paths. Yeah. But it will only handle the SVG one. But with the processor in general, yeah, you could
Yeah.
totally go through and do like all kinds of things. You could even go and edit that linear gradient that is part of the definitions and make it have a different color. I mean, it's pretty nice, like a lot of the stuff that becomes possible in PHP with this for manipulating literally anything, but especially things like SVGs and image files and galleries and anything sort of dynamic that you might get like rendered output for from somewhere else, and but you want to have to manipulate it on the server before it even hits the front end.
I'm curious what they're going to be using this for in core. Like I now I want to know like the backstory. Like what was the use case that triggered this? Where are the places that we're like starting to see it get used? We need to do some like discovery work.
Yeah. I remember I was curious about it too, and I did start to look it up. And I think that it has something to do with like upcoming phase 3 work that is related to like the collaboration and the translation and the changing of the dashboard. Something to do with that. But yeah, that would be interesting to like dig into for sure and see exactly what prompted this need to create a much better, more effective version of basically traversing like any kind of HTML.
Yeah. And so you could use this once in the header and you could pass it like a class or something
Hmm.
that changes it to be like a white, on a dark background. And you could,
Yeah,
start contextually like spitting out the same SVG in multiple places. Um,
totally.
yeah, very cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could just go in here right now and give it another, like, make the height also be 200 pixels. I don't know what that's going to do, but let's see. In this case, it didn't really change it much. Hold on. Let me make it 500 pixels. So because it's just changing the height, it's just changing the height of the whole SVG element here, but now it's 500 pixels. Like it works really well. It's actually really fast, very performant, and I'm really excited to like play with it a lot more. And it definitely made adding a lightbox to the gallery block in WordPress so much easier than it ever has been before. That I was like, thank you. Why didn't this exist before? But I'm so happy that it exists now.
Yeah, I could see like things like adding data attributes when you're dealing with like light boxes, carousels, things like that. I could see
Yes,
adding like
exactly.
ARIA labels to things when you know that you need those like ARIA labels on things.
Yeah.
there's all sorts of cool things you could do with it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I have for us today. You know, I thought it would be fun to take a look at the HTML tag processor. I wrote a blog post about it a couple weeks ago as well.
And there's a bunch of other like a bunch of interesting ways to include SVGs in WordPress, and I thought it was really cool to see everybody kind of had like their own little snippet. Like I've done an annoying thing where I'll just make it a PHP file and use like get template part because
Yeah, I've
it's
done
like
that too.
dynamic, but then you're like you have to rename all the SVGs to like because it only works with PHP files. So it's kind of fun
Hmm.
to see like everybody's different little like ways to do it. I think that this is probably gonna with the tag processor, like this is gonna be kind of like the new gold standard get SVG uh, gist that kind of gets shared around. I think my prediction.
Well, I guess we'll see. I know that there was a lot of conversation around it on Twitter when I first shared it, so it'll be interesting to see if there are iterations or if other people come up with even more improved versions. Like maybe, like just like you said, like the ability to maybe also deal with the inner components of SVG elements and not just the top level. That would be
Mm-hmm.
cool too. Dealing with the error of, hey, what if I passed it the extension as well? Will it be able to fix that? So I think iteratively, something like this will probably become like the way a lot of people handle not just SVGs, but a lot of different like files and inclusions that you sometimes need to do. Yeah. I guess we'll talk next week.
All right, I'll see you then.
See ya.
Visit viewsource.fm for the latest updates and links to the show notes. Review and subscribe to ViewSource in iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.